Fantasy Theory podcast, bringing it for the real thing. This week, I'd like to talk about twisting the narrative, as I think what I'll end up calling it. So, it's essentially how we as analysts can say with such confidence that player X, player A, player Y, whoever, is about to go off in 2021, while you can hear that exact same player is set for a fall from grace in 2021 from another source. We'll start with just a little bit of news as I reach for the news drop button.
So what do you guys hear? What's the scuttlebutt?
The news is huge. We've been talking about it for a while now. Julio Jones has been traded. In exchange for Julio Jones and a sixth-round pick, the Falcons are receiving a 2022 second and a 2023 fourth from Julio Jones' new team, the Tennessee Titans. I'll tell you what, I've been working on my Photoshop skills, and I don't think that looks half bad. That transition, boom. Julio Jones is a Falcon. Psych. Now he's a Titan. You love to see it. I've got Julio Jones in number 8. I think most people will tell you that's likely to be his number. I don't think A.J. Brown is giving up the number 11 in Tennessee. And now that they've changed the way that the numbers work in the NFL, Julio can wear the number 8 that he wore when he was at Alabama. So that number 8, I think, is probably going to be his number. Marcus Mariota was kind enough to leave the team a few years ago and let that number be available for him. So the fantasy impact here of Julio Jones moving is, as I've said, is something that is a big enough topic that it's going to get its own show. So I just wanted to let you know this is what's going on. Most likely Thursday's episode will be almost exclusively dedicated to this trade. What does it mean for Julio? What does it mean for A.J. Brown? What does it mean for Derrick Henry, if anything? What does it mean for Ryan Tannehill? What does it mean for the players that he's leaving behind? Matt Ryan, I can tell you in the brief research that I've done, it ain't good for Matt Ryan. What does it do for Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, and Kyle Pitts? Again, we're going to talk about all of that on Thursday. That is enough to dive into, enough people to talk about the change here. We're going to dive into that on Thursday. So we'll get into the actual show. Now, I want to caveat, before I start telling you about how none of us are to be trusted, the real point of the talk that we're going to have is that there are stats you can use to support any narrative you want to tell. You, as a fantasy football player, want to get as many opinions as you can so that you can make your own conclusions. Really, this is good advice for life, as getting into an echo chamber is generally not going to ever turn out well for you. For example, if you, like me, listen to a lot of the fantasy pros, like Kyle Yates, he'll talk a lot about Jonnu Smith. He loves Jonnu Smith, and Jonnu Smith is ready to break out. I have been in that echo chamber for going on 3 years now. It hasn't happened yet, and honestly, I haven't gotten out of it yet, so Jonnu Smith is certainly about to break out. Next, Travis Kelce, obviously.
Of course. Of course. Of course.
So what I hope you can do with this information is know that if you just listen to one source, it's probably not in your best interest. So, if you just listen to ESPN, you just listen to CBS, you just listen to the fantasy footballers, that one may be a little bit less so because they've got 3 different voices on there. But essentially, if you just listen to one source, you're going to hear the same type of information each time. They're going to have their own biases, and myself included, for sure. But those biases are going to lead you to a point where you think that somebody that they talk about a lot is bust proof. So you're gonna. I'll use another example for me. I listened to a lot of. It was a couple years ago, so I don't remember exactly the source, but one of the podcasts that I listened to said that Terrell Pryor was going to blow up now that he switched to wide receiver. So much so that I ended up taking Terrell Pryor at the start of the 3rd round in one of my drafts, and he was real terrible. So you hear that narrative over and over again that this person is good because of these reasons, and they always have facts to back it up. Nobody's going to just out and out lie to you. They've always got facts to support it, but here's the main crux of the thing is that you can pick and choose facts that support your argument. So you can always spin the narrative and tell the story that you want to tell based on the facts that you choose. So what we're going to do is today go through a few surprise mystery players, and I'm going to give you the story about why player A is better than player B, and then we'll talk a little bit about some other players who, again, you can choose to look at one side of the story or the other, to tell the narrative that you're trying. So, what I hope you can do with your time that you afford yourself to consume fantasy football advice is to take in multiple opinions and sources and decide the information that makes sense to you so you can build a team that you're happy with. Like I said, when I was listening to the information about Terrell Pryor, that jived with what I thought. Ended up obviously being wrong, but I was happy with my decision because it was somebody that I believed in based on what I had taken in. So, like I said, what I hope you do is that you take in multiple sources and form your own opinion so that you can make the best decision for you, so that even if somebody doesn't pan out the way that you think, at least it's not because you were like, this guy said he was going to be great and he's a jerk. You don't want any of that. Obviously, I want you to listen to multiple sources. I'm sure that a lot of you do. If you've only got time to listen to one, obviously it's the most important thing to listen to me. I'm never going to steer you wrong. It's those other guys that are going to lie to you. I'll never break your heart. So we're going to start with our first slide here. So player A, we're going to talk about a couple quarterbacks here. So player A, you can see 37 attempts per game. I'm going to actually scooch this over here real quick. Boop. So player A, 37 attempts per game. Player B, 33 attempts per game. Fairly close, not too bad. Player A's completion percentage, 71%. Player B's completion percentage, 66%. Player A edges him out there. Yards per game, it's not even close. 109 more yards per game for player A than player B. The touchdown rate, player A's is 9.4%. That's absolutely ridiculous. Player B's 4.6, a little bit more in line with what you might expect for an average quarterback. Player B, fewer interceptions per game, about a half an interception less per game, so you like to see that. Their rush yards per game about the same, 33 and 31. Their fantasy points per game, here's the real stark contrast here, and the main thing you can look at to know what I'm trying to say here. Player A's fantasy points per game, 35.8. Ridiculous, okay? And this isn't just a small sample size, a little snippet. This is 8 games that I took of player A and 8 games that I took of player B. So it's a reasonable sample size here. So 35.8 points per game for player A. So player B, 20.0 flat. Like 150% more points out of player A. So who is player A? Who can it be now? Player A is Russell Wilson, quarterback, Seattle Seahawks. In an 8-game sample size that I looked at from 2020, Russell Wilson was a monster, an absolute monster. I mean, almost 36 points per game. That man is winning you weeks by himself, and you could not have been happier to have him on your team. Who is player B, though?
That's a mystery.
Player B, also Russell Wilson, quarterback, Seattle Seahawks. So you may have heard me talk about this on the show before, but Russell Wilson's beginning of the season and end of the season splits in multiple years have been just staggering. So Russell Wilson and the splits here that I took, obviously, were the first 8 games and the last 8 games of last season. And in the last 8 games of last season, Russell Wilson was killing your team by and large. 200 pass yards per game, like 31 rushing yards. He's not making up for it there. 20 fantasy points is not getting it done for your quarterback. So this, again, is to illustrate that the people that you're listening to, and I'm really not trying to say that everybody that you listen to is liars. Quite the opposite. I think everybody that you listen to is telling you things that they truly believe, and they're backing it up with facts that are accurate and not made up, not loosey-goosey math, that type of stuff. People are telling you what they truly believe. So the issue is, again, making sure that you're getting multiple sources of input, maybe even doing your own research, things like that, so that you can form these complete opinions so that you're not getting kind of led down a road of narrative street that they're trying to tell you. They're trying to back up their opinion with facts that support their argument. So you want to make sure that you're getting the whole picture. Again, I think doing your own research is definitely vital. Maybe you don't have the time to do that. Even before I started the podcast here, I was doing a lot of my own research, but that was just a lot of fun, and I had that kind of free time. But, if you've got time in a week to listen to 1 or 2 podcasts, something like that, you may get kind of led down led down a road of thinking that a certain person that a website is talking about is insane. What I want to show you is Russell Wilson is just a good example of showing you the difference that, if I wanted to talk up Russell Wilson, I could say in his last 8 games last year, absolutely terrible. Don't draft Russell Wilson next year. He's going to let you down. If I was pro Russell Wilson, I could say, look, he got off to a hot start last year. Maybe some things fell apart towards the end, but at the start of last year, he was getting 35.8 points per game. This man is a monster. Draft him early, draft him often. I can use actual facts to support either way that I want you to believe. Again, the point is that however I feel, whatever I think is the truth of a player, I'm going to use statistics that back that up. Like I said, I'm not going to lie to you. Other fantasy analysts I really don't think are going to lie to you. They're going to give you their honest opinion. But the more sources of input that you can get, the more of a full opinion. You'll get the full story. You're getting half the story from a lot of people. And you want to get that full story so that you can make opinions and conclusions that are your own. We'll run this exercise back one more time. I'll show you some running backs here. So in the middle, if you're watching on YouTube, is the league average. I'll just hit you with that real quick if you're listening on the podcast. League average yards per carry last year, 4.4. Yards after contact, 2.07. Yards created per touch, so outside of what your line blocks for you, how much extra you're getting. The league average was 1.25. Yards per target, just over 6. Yards per catch, just under 8. So player A, 5.68 yards per carry, well above league average. Player B, 3.6 yards per carry, well below. Player A, yards after contact, 3.6, again, well above league average, almost double league average. Player B, 1.7, a little bit below league average. Yards created per touch, player A's 2.15 is almost a full yard above league average. Player B's 1.02, about a quarter yard below league average. Yards per target, player A, 12.67, player B, 5.31. Player B, again, a little bit below league average. Player A, almost double league average. Actually, more than double league average. Math is hard. And yards per catch, player A, 16.29, more than double league average. Player B's 6.57, almost a yard and a half less than league average. Now, you'll see here that player A's ADP is the running back 102. He's going undrafted. Player B is the running back 14. He's going in the second round. Player B, given what I've just told you, so much worse than player A. So much worse than player A. How is it possible that player B is going in the second round and player A is going undrafted if player A is so much better? So who is player A?
Now to see who this phantom really is.
Player A, New England Patriots running back Sony Michel. So Sony Michel got about 10 rushes and 1 target per game last year in the games that he played. Just the opportunity isn't there. He had an extremely efficient year with the ball in his hands last year. He just didn't get the ball in his hands nearly enough to be a reliable fantasy asset. So again, I can use the facts, not made up numbers or anything like that, the absolute facts that support my argument. If I wanted to tell you that Sony Michel is going to break out this year, because, I mean, look how efficient he is. Every time they gave him the ball, he did incredible things with it. How can they not give him the ball again this year? Look how great he was. He was so far above league average. How can Sony Michel not get the ball more often this year? Player B, on the other hand, was well below league average in a lot of categories. He's going in the second round. But who is player B?
Surprise, motherfucker.
Player B is Joe Mixon, running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. So Joe Mixon's opportunity, he had, in the games that he played, he had almost 20 rush attempts per game and 4.3 targets per game. That workload is ridiculous. So I can tell you either story that I want to based on the numbers that we're looking at here. I can tell you we're back. I can tell you that Joe Mixon is a bum. He's not very efficient, even though he's probably going to get a really big workload. He's not somebody that you can count on. He's just not going to be efficient with those touches. Even though he's going to get a lot of touches, he's not going to do much or enough with them. Maybe that type of inefficiency brings in Samaje Perine, brings in one of the rookies that they drafted. Maybe they take some of the opportunity away from him if he's this inefficient. I don't believe that, but I can certainly tell you that story and back it up with the facts that support my argument. And same thing, like I said, for Sony Michel, you can spin it whichever way that you want to, and that's the main thing here. We'll look at one more. I'm not going to try and fool you again, but Deontay Johnson. So if I'm pro Deontay Johnson, I'm going to talk to you about his opportunity. Number 6 in targets last year. Number 2 in pass plays per game on the Steelers last year. So essentially, what that means, the Steelers had the second most pass attempts per game last year. He was number 1 in targets per route run, so his hog rate was incredible, and he was number 13 in catches. I mean, Deontay Johnson, he gets the ball often. He gets the ball no matter what else is going on. Ben Roethlisberger is just locked on Deontay Johnson. He's looking for him every opportunity that he gets. Deontay Johnson is going to be hyper-targeted, and because of that, you can absolutely believe in him in fantasy football this year as, a wide receiver, probably a wide receiver 2, maybe even a high-end 2, given this kind of opportunity, this volume that he's certain to see. Now, if I'm anti-Deontay Johnson, which I certainly am, I'll tell you that his true catch rate was number 79 in the league. His yards per route run was number 49 in the league. He was number 1 in drops at wide receiver. His yards per target, number 98. His yards per catch, number 88. So those numbers are going to support my argument that Deontay Johnson, even though he's getting all of those touches, he sucks. I don't like Deontay Johnson. When you throw him the ball, I mean, he's almost as likely to drop it as he is catch it, for God's sake. He's just not efficient with the ball at all. That's a product a little bit of the offense that they were running last year, but Deontay Johnson, he's just not it. I know he's getting a lot of targets, but he's just not doing anything with them. He's just not being productive. So I do hear a lot of the love for Deontay Johnson, and yeah, I think both of these things are true. His opportunity is going to be off the charts. Ben Roethlisberger loves him for whatever reason, and definitely the opportunity is something that you can buy into. You can also buy into his efficiency. So it's essentially, which one do you think wins out? Is Juju Smith-Schuster gonna resurface in another year in Pittsburgh? Is Chase Claypool going to ascend in year 2, as most receivers tend to do, and that opportunity is going to go down for Deontay and he's going to stink? Or was the mildly putrid offense that the Steelers had last year a lot of the reason for Deontay Johnson's inefficiency? His opportunity may stay the same, his efficiency may go up, and he could be a monster in his own right this year. I think my personal opinion is that the efficiency is a lot on him. He is not an alpha wide receiver. I do think that Chase Claypool ascends in year 2, and I think Deontay Johnson finishes as a low-end 2, maybe a high-end 3 even, essentially just based on that opportunity. Probably a low-end 2, if I'm honest. I haven't, of course, done my full season projections yet. That is going to take up most of probably this month and next month so that I can have those ready. So we'll have those numbers coming soon. But for right now, off the top of my head, I'd say Deontay Johnson, low-end 2, high-end 3, whereas you may see him as high as a number 1 receiver based on his opportunity if people really love him and excuse his efficiency for last year. That's just not me. So, you'll listen to me, and I'll tell you that Deontay Johnson is somebody that you should avoid in drafts. You can listen to, for example, BDGE, Nick Ercolano, who has just an absolutely fantastic channel and podcast that he puts out. A really, really smart guy. I'll put his link in the description here. You should definitely follow him. And super entertaining too. So, but he's somebody that loves Deontay Johnson. So you'll listen to him and you'll get just the absolute polar opposite opinion out of him that you'll get out of me on this. So again, that's what I'm trying to show you, is that you're going to hear from me, Deontay Johnson sucks. I don't want you to take him off of your board because I said so. At the same time, if you listen to Nick on BDGE, you're going to hear Deontay Johnson's awesome, and maybe you'll take him, in the third or fourth round, depending on his ADP. And then if I'm right, you're going to feel like you wasted that pick. But I don't want you to go and say, oh, Nick led me wrong. He thought Deontay Johnson was going to be awesome. He wasn't. What an idiot. That's the kind of thing that I'm trying to get across here, is make sure that you're getting as much input as you can so that you can form your own opinions about these players. Find what makes sense to you, which things are noteworthy and which things are irrelevant, and form your own opinion about each and every player that you want to put on your team this year. So at the end of the day, you feel comfortable with the team that you've put together. So no matter which way it goes, you don't, at the end of it, just start pointing fingers out and being like, oh, that guy, he told me this was going to happen and it didn't happen. Because like I've said before, we are kind of reducing it down maybe a little bit too much, but for all intents and purposes, we're fortune tellers. We're doing our best with the numbers and the historical data that we have to project out the future. It is never going to be 100% accurate. If it's 60% accurate, you've got something special. So we're going to give you our best guess. We're going to do the research. We're going to put in the time and give you guys the most accurate opinion that we can form based on the research that we're doing. It's nothing that we're ever going to tell you is a money-back guarantee, not a lock of the week of the century. Maybe we'll give you some of that in the week to week, and we'll have some strong opinions about some people like Deontay Johnson, again, for example. Let's cut me back in here. Deontay Johnson, for example, if he goes out and finishes as like a low-end number one wide receiver because he gets 150 targets or something like this and gets 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns, am I going to be surprised? Nah, not really. He's going to get the volume that is a reasonable outcome for him. If he goes out there and gets 120 targets and finishes with 800 yards and 5 touchdowns, am I going to be surprised? Nah, not at all. That's the thing about these numbers, is that they support either case. And like I said, just listen to as much as you can and find out what makes sense to you. Form your own opinions. Find the guys that you like because of the information that you've taken in. And everybody's league has the person who comes in with Matthew Berry's top 200. Boom, in a row, whoever's the top listed name that hasn't been taken yet, that's who I'm taking because Matthew Berry's a smart guy, and that's not going to work out for you. It's just not. Matthew Berry is a smart guy for sure. He's the prettiest girl at the bar. That much I think we all can agree. It's just the more information that you can take in, the more that you can draw from, the better conclusions you can form, and the happier that you'll be with your team at the end of the day, because you'll have some ownership over it. That's something that, at least for me, is certainly important. The person who comes in with that top 200 draft list, you might as well be on auto draft. Like, why not just go on auto draft? You want to have that ownership. You want to put your stamp on the team that you're building, whether it's dynasty, whether it's redraft, whatever it is. So again, the more that you can take in, the more information that you can gather and mold around in your mind and find out what makes sense to you, the better off you're going to be, the better you're going to feel about your team, and honestly, likely, the better your results are going to be. So listen to me. Number one, if you've only got time for that, listen to me, obviously. If you've got time for multiple, listen to as much as you can, read as much as you can, watch as much as you can. Of course, everybody's got different demands on their time. So like I said, if you've only got a little bit of time, just, again, do as much as you can with it, as much as you can. If you've got time to listen to half an hour a day of podcasts and somebody's putting out 5 episodes a week, maybe only listen to a couple of their episodes. Maybe listen to a different podcast. Get a little bit of a different thing. Again, the last thing you want to do is end up in an echo chamber where they're going to tell you over and over again that this person is great because here's why. Because you're not getting the full story. I'm going to stop rambling and keep saying the same thing. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get out of here. A little bit shorter episode for the YouTubes. People don't like to sit and watch as much, I feel like. So a little bit shorter episode for the YouTubes, a little bit shorter for the podcast. But all in all, something that I really do think is an important takeaway. But that'll do it for this episode of the Fantasy Theory Podcast. So we'll go ahead and we'll get through the shameless self-promotion. Check out the website, The Fantasy Theory. Check out our Instagram at The Fantasy Theory and our Twitter at Fantasy Theory 1. Twitter only gives you 15 characters. The Fantasy Theory is exactly 16 characters. You absolutely hate to see it. We're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and of course now YouTube. So if you have the time on Apple Podcasts, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a review with your honest opinion, your questions, comments, concerns, that type of thing, it really means a lot to me. That feedback is helpful in making the show better moving forward, and that review helps bump us up the list so that more people can listen to the show, come find the YouTube channel, watch the show, that type of thing. So that review is invaluable. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit a thumbs up on the video if you enjoyed the content today, and hit that subscribe button for sure. Let me know down in the comments anybody that has kind of had that Terrell Pryor effect that I talked about, where somebody you hear from one person talk up over and over and over again, and you kind of, yeah, that all makes sense. That sounds good. And then it just totally flames out. Has that happened to you before? If so, leave in the comments that story. I would love to see those. That is all that we've got for this week. So thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.